I have now played over 700 hours of Baldur's Gate 3. I've been playing it to an obsessive level. It is the most played game that I've ever had outside of Terraria and MMOs, and that's crazy to think about because that's a staggering amount of gameplay. But it was worth it. Beyond worth it. It's one of my favorite, if not my favorite gaming experience of my entire time being a gamer. And now today I could be talking to you guys about all of the changes that are coming with the recent patch, or maybe things that they're going to be looking to fix or work on or add to the game in the future. But instead, what I want to do is I want to retrospectively look at Baldur's Gate 3 as well as other Larian Studios games and talk to you guys about things that I want to see in Larian's next game, whether that's Baldur's Gate 4 or Divinity Original Sin 3 or whatever Sven is writing about in space. After playing hundreds of hours of Baldur's Gate 3, I went back to give Divinity Original Sin 2 another playthrough, just to compare to see how far Larian has come. And one thing that I realized very quickly after playing Divinity Original Sin 2 is that I didn't like being shoehorned into only having access to 4 characters from the start. In Divinity Original Sin, your original character, once you pick them up, you can pick up 3 other party members, and you just leave the rest behind. The camp system in Baldur's Gate 3 is something that I simply can't do without. It's largely why many campaigns feel so unique to the next. You can still talk to those other characters, interact with their stories, and pull them into the party at any given moment, and that drastically changes the gameplay, the narrative, and just about everything about that whole playthrough experience. I think there's a lot of systems in Baldur's Gate 3 that we often probably take for granted, mostly because we just don't really even think about it. We don't critically analyze some of the mechanics of all the games that we play, but that's kind of the purpose of this video in the first place, is for you and I to have a conversation about those things and see whether or not they're things that we want to see happen more in the future. And the camp system is one of those. It is a really odd experience going to Divinity Original Sin 2 and not having access to those characters and their stories, being able to progress those stories in the same way that I do in Baldur's Gate 3, where in Baldur's Gate 3, whoever I meet, that is recruitable obviously, I can put them in my camp, I can pull them into combat anytime I want. I can't tell you how many times I've had Gale as a sorcerer or a wizard, or Astarion as a ranger, and I switch out my range DPS any chance I get, depending on the encounters and things like that, because sometimes some enemies have counterspell. God, I hate counterspell. But with that said, think about the stories, think about the romance options and things like that. These characters are still a part of your adventure, and that's really important to every narrative playthrough of a game. Not even talking about the flexibility in gameplay. And imagine not being able to have Halsin in your camp, not being able to progress his story regardless of whether or not you're having him in your party or not. This is something that I want to see more in Larian games in the future, but it's also something that I want to see more games do in the future. This is something that we've seen games do in the past. Mass Effect gave us the ability to switch characters in and out, which is something I definitely appreciated there. So this is not something that's necessarily new. However, their approach to it in Baldur's Gate 3 is something that I want to see more of. We've seen the numbers and we've seen the memes. People loved spending hours and hours in character customization in Baldur's Gate 3 the day that it launched. However, I can't be the only one to feel like while the customization was good, it could have been a little bit more thorough, a little bit more in-depth. And I realize that there is a multitude of reasons as to why Larian didn't make an incredibly flexible character creator. However, I imagine many players, myself included, would like to see the next game have more options for customization. We're already playing a class fantasy dating simulator. Having more flexibility in how we create our characters and what our characters look like just makes us that much more immersed, that much more connected and invested into the characters that we make. Now, I realize that many of these studios, when they're creating these character creators, the last thing they want us to do is really create abominations to walk around in. And there's also some concerns with how gear looks on you and clipping and things like that. So it's a bit of a nuanced topic when we're talking about character creation. Not every game can do something like the Street Fighter series does, or even Elden Ring or other games like that, because, well, it just doesn't work in the context of the game, especially in a game that's mostly focused on the narrative in the first place. But with that said, again, I can't be the only one that wants to have a little bit more customization, more flexibility over the proportions of my character, over how their body looks and things like that. And while I do think that Larian's customization worked really well in Baldur's Gate 3, who came out with some really good-looking characters, especially now that we've had our time to get into a little bit of modding. With that said, I want to see more. I want to see more flexibility. I want to see more options, and I think that's probably true for most people. Voice acting in cinematics like Baldur's Gate 3. For me, one of the most impactful and memorable parts of Baldur's Gate 3 were the voice performances. The voice actors of this game just did a fantastic job. The animators locked it in, and it just made it for an incredible experience. While there have been definitely a lot of games in the past that have had incredible voice acting, like Red Dead Redemption 2 or the Mass Effect series, there was something about the animation and the delivery of voice performances in Baldur's Gate 3 that kept me immersed in every moment and invested in every single character that I met or had in my party. At times, the raw emotion on display from the voice cast could have me in tears or rolling on the floor with laughter. It's something that I know that we're probably not going to be seeing outside of Baldur's Gate 3 for a long time. However, if anyone can deliver on this kind of experience again, it's Larian Studios. If Larian is making another CRPG, this is an absolute must for me. There were times where I felt like I was watching a television show where certain things would happen, certain sequences in the story or narrative would take off, and I would just sit back and watch, and I was enraptured in every moment that was happening. And I can't be the only one that felt like this, because I can see how many of the people responded to their Baldur's Gate 3 experience and how much they loved the characters and the story overall. And with that said, they broke the limits for what voice acting and voice performances and performance capture is in video games for me. There have been great games in the past that have had similar displays, but nothing as solid, nothing as almost tangible as Baldur's Gate 3 for me. And I realized that when Sven Vinke first was wanting to make Baldur's Gate 3, he wanted to make a fully voice-acted game. That was the first thing that he wanted to do. And they came out and they did it, and they killed it, and it ended up being fantastic. And I just don't want Sven or Larian to lose the heart of that, because it's just so damn good. After playing Baldur's Gate 3 and returning to Divinity Original Sin 2, I realized how painful it feels to have your action economy tied to your movement. Move too much and you can't heal, attack, or take any action. Move too little and you might not even be able to get in range of using your abilities or get out of range of any enemy danger. Baldur's Gate 3 using D&D's rule set alleviated this headache, and it just felt good. It made combat feel more natural and tactical, where we were able to use all the verticality of the map and leverage our skills in a way that just felt right. Playing Divinity, it felt like I couldn't use the full battlefield. I didn't have it all at my disposal, and especially with how control of elemental ground play worked in Divinity Original Sin 2, you find yourself with very limited terrain to use in the first place. If Larian is working on another homebrew game, I'm hoping that this is something that they take with them. Now, this is largely a crossover between Larian's homebrew mechanics and then also D&D 5th edition rule set, and how they kind of blended those two things together for Baldur's Gate 3. And it's not just the movement. I also want them to keep being able to throw potions or items or weapons or enemies or allies, because those kind of things add so much flexibility to the gameplay that every single encounter feels different because of it. I can't tell you how many times, especially in multiplayer and in honor mode, or even worse, multiplayer honor mode, how many times having those kind of abilities completely changed the dynamic of gameplay, where, you know, one of us didn't really even have to play as a support or healer because we could just have people that were throwing potions. As long as we were stocked up on stuff, we could just toss those things all over the place. And it made for a lot of fun and a lot of really cool and memorable moments. You've seen clips online of people fighting the Forge Golem or something like that, throwing a potion or laying a potion on the ground that they step into or something like that. And it's just really cool. And I want that. I want more things like that. I want to see them try to cross over some of those 5th edition rule set into their own rule set, or at least try to adapt some of that stuff, because I think it adds just a lot more flexibility, a lot more creativity for the player, and that's the thing that we want the most. We want to be able to express ourselves in the game, and giving us that kind of flexibility like they did with Baldur's Gate 3 is exactly what we want. In one of the later patches of Baldur's Gate 3, Larian added epilogues, and it was initially something that they didn't think players wanted. However, after they learned otherwise, they quickly implemented them into the game, and it added so much extra value. Baldur's Gate 3 in many ways didn't feel just like playing a game. It felt like a genuine adventure that you went on with your friends or people that you connected with, people that you just wanted to learn more about and get closer with. Epilogues felt like a natural conclusion to this journey. While not all questions were answered, we still got to see how our companions fared after the events of the game. Personally, I want Larian to continue this tradition, giving us some type of continued ending, something where we can see that the adventure still goes on in some way, shape, or form. Something that doesn't have maybe as much narrative importance as other things in the game, but it just closes a chapter on the friendship that we shared with those companions that we had and the journeys that we went on. Now, speaking of changes to the game after the credits roll, one thing that I would like to see is some type of New Game Plus experience. I don't really necessarily like the idea of only being able to change the overall experience if you're able to play the game on Honor Mode. Most players, I would imagine many players at least, can't really wrap their heads around playing on Honor Mode. It is difficult. It can get hard at times. Most people don't even play on Tactical to begin with. Most of the people that I know are still playing the game on Normal or even Story Mode. And with that said, I think having some type of like New Game Plus evolution of the game would be interesting, because there's many elements of the game that don't change regardless of whatever mode you're playing it on. Certain items, or all items, are going to spawn where they spawn no matter what, and I would like to see a little bit variation in equipment and things like that. One of the things that I really enjoyed about modding Divinity Original Sin 2 was the ability to have a Diablo-style loot system where there would be randomized loot, and you could identify things, and identifying items would end up having items with random attributes and things like that. And while I really enjoy how gear interacts in Baldur's Gate 3, I would like to see a little bit more variation in that, because it can get a little repetitive from playthrough to playthrough. I mean, I've played the game for 700 hours, so obviously it's going to get a little repetitive at times. But with that said, I would like to see a little bit more variation in that, and I don't really want that to be on the onus of the modders to create that kind of replayability for us. I would like to see Larian do that themselves, because they're going to make things that are going to fit and feel more natural with the game overall. I'm going to say it, I love crafting systems in video games, as long as they are not intrusive or required to play the game. I love the idea of a Larian RPG with characters that have professions, giving us access to unique alchemy recipes, weapons, spells, equipment, and more. While I liked the crafting system in both Divinity Original Sin and Baldur's Gate 3, I always felt there could be a little bit more, and giving players choice is something that's Larian's strong suit. Crafting, if implemented properly, can create a metagame where we're searching for unique materials or recipes, all to be able to use our specialized characters, and it's something that just fits really well with our class fantasy overall. When I sit back and think about how something like this would work, I think of something similar to Witch's Bane in Baldur's Gate 3. While I'm not going to spoil anything, because I realize everybody has different kind of playthroughs. Some people haven't even played the game or even got even into Act 3. There's still people that are playing so much of this game. It's absolutely insane. I can't believe the concurrent player numbers are still over like 150,000 at this point. It's just crazy. It goes to show just how long the legs of this game is. Now, with that said, when I'm talking about the Witch's Bane, I'm talking about something that I get later in the game, and it's as a result of the quest decisions that I've made in the game. And if you find that specific recipe, then you open up the ability to be able to craft it and then use it against a certain enemy in the game, keeping spoilers aside. And that's really cool. And I like the idea of having quest rewards and quest paths lead to different crafting recipes and things like that. Different choices that we make with our characters, whether it's our class fantasy or whether it's the narrative itself, leading us to be able to get different types of recipes to make different types of things, weapons, things like that. I think they kind of did something really interesting with the Susur bark and the Susur tree. However, I want to see more of that. And I want to see our characters be able to specialize in those kind of things. I would like to be able to have characters that are a blacksmith or an alchemist or what would you even call somebody that writes spells? Like an inscriber? I don't know. But you get what I'm saying. I want to see more things like that, where it's not just me specializing in my class as a wizard or a sorcerer. It's also me choosing these other ways to be able to fully flesh out my character fantasy and really dive into some of the more nuanced areas of the game. And the more I've played Baldur's Gate 3, while I absolutely love and enjoy the game, I want a little bit more nuanced systems in the game that are not necessary to engage with, but can expand your gameplay and your experience almost indefinitely. I love Larian's games. Whether the next game is Baldur's Gate 4, Divinity Original Sin 3, or something else entirely, I know that they're going to deliver an outstanding product because that's just what they do, and they seem to only be getting better at doing it. This is a developer that makes games for the players first, in a time in which the industry has been growing distant and self-absorbed. Whatever they do, whatever the game looks like, it's going to be great, and it's something that I can't wait for. Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the greatest gaming experiences that I've ever had in my life, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find something as similar to it. I don't think we're going to see another Baldur's Gate 3 or a game with as much impact as it for quite a long time, because it's just that special of an experience. And I do believe that a video like this and discussions like this really help Larian Studios in the future, because they become a discussion and see what the players like. And that's the only thing that they're really interested in. They're interested in making a game that's good for them and a good game for us. And I truly believe that. I think that largely Baldur's Gate 3 is a very special moment in video game history, but it's also a very special moment for me as a creator, because if it wasn't for Baldur's Gate 3, I wouldn't be in the position that I am right now. I wouldn't have the audience that I have. I wouldn't have you guys that are watching my videos that have enabled me to do something that I've wanted to do since I was a kid. I've always dreamed of working in the video game industry. And because of you and watching my videos and helping me grow, I've been able to not have to work in construction anymore and chase this dream of being a video journalist, opinion writer. I don't really know exactly what I am, but I love it. But I think a video like this is really important, because it's an opportunity for me as a creator and you as a community that also loves Baldur's Gate 3 to talk about the things that we want to see happen with this game in the future, because I don't think we're going to see another Baldur's Gate 3 in a really long time. And if we do find an experience that's similar to it, that's as impactful and as special, I am led to believe it's going to be coming from Larian Studios again. So us having this discussion, us talking about these things that we want, the things that we want to see, the things that we want to see kept, is important, because Larian Studios watches these kind of videos. This is largely what helped them be able to create the game that they made in the first place, was community feedback, how much they engage their community. And they watch me, they watch Wolfheart, they watch a lot of people. They watch all of us. They talk to everybody, including you as well. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. What do you guys want to see them keep? What would you guys like to see them do to their next game? What would you like their next game to be? Me? I don't care what it is, as long as it's coming from them. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, think about supporting me on Patreon. My link is going to be left down below. Any support helps. And outside of that, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends. And of course, I will see you in Baldur's Gate. Peace!